And what was so shocking about it was the degree that I was trapped. I felt like I was in agonizing pain and I couldn't find a way. And here I am. I've helped people get out of relationships all the time, and I couldn't seem to get, and I felt real fear.
He studied her, he identified what she needed, he mirrored it back to her perfectly, and by the time she realized what was happening, she was already trapped. This is not a story about a naive woman who missed the signs. This is the story of Dr. Kerry McAvoy, a psychologist who was deliberately targeted, systematically manipulated, and methodically controlled by a predator who knew exactly what he was doing. This is what coercive control actually looks like. And after this conversation, you will never look at a new relationship the same way again. So without further ado, help me welcome Dr. Kerry McAvoy. Kerry, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here today.
Thank you. I have been so looking forward to this conversation. I know many people are already familiar with your work, but for anybody who might not have heard of you before, can you tell us just a high-level story about you, how you got into this work, specializing in narcissistic abuse, complex trauma, and all those things?
Sure. Yeah, I started out as a psychologist. So I had a private practice for probably roughly 20, altogether, I practiced for 25 plus years. Had a family. We were living and raising 3 kids. Was in a good marriage. And then found out that my husband really suddenly developed symptoms and that led to a discovery that he had terminal cancer. He's in his early 50s. We were thinking about retirement. Our last kid was about ready to leave home. And it was the kind of cancer that it just wasn't, it encompassed our life. It brought on a dementia and psychosis for him. And it forced me to have to give up my practice and to become his caregiver for the last 5.5 months of his life. It was just this rapid, terribly devastating experience that was very traumatizing. And my kids were 24, 21, and 17. My last child was a senior in high school. It was just all consuming. So I closed my practice and then lost him. And then basically my whole life blew apart in a way that nobody prepares you for that kind of. First of all, death is always incredibly rattling, but when you're in that stage of life, I felt like a volcano had gone off and just decimated my life. And I wanted the life that I had back. And so here I am, retired, in the sense of I knew I couldn't walk into the office and see people because I was too raw. And I was so angry and so consumed with jealousy of the life that I had wanted being robbed from me that I instead started writing what happened. And I have not released the story about my late husband's death. I don't know if I ever will, but I started writing and learning to write. And then at the same time, I started dating really fast and furiously and met a lot of wonderful men, but just no matches. And then a year out, I ended up meeting somebody that I thought was fabulous and sort of ticked all the boxes. And little did I know that I recognize he was narcissistic, but we don't talk about in school that narcissistic relationships are harmful. I never learned that in school, even though I actually had a little bit of some training in a lot of training in personality disorders and some training in domestic violence. But this was an area that doesn't exist. I don't think still doesn't exist in most graduate programs. So I recognize he had a personality traits, and that probably would mean he's a little selfish. Got into this relationship and just sort of descended into this really nightmarish reality, horrific reality and what was so shocking about it was the degree that I was trapped. I felt like I was in agonizing pain and I couldn't find a way. And here I am. I've helped people get out of relationships all the time. And I couldn't seem to get, and I felt real fear. In fact, I've recently read through Don Hedessy's book, How He Gets Into Her Head, and I've interviewed him twice. And in the back of the book, he has this scale called brainwashing scale. And I took it. And even though I never was struck and never called names, I scored brainwashing with terror. I had been so completely immersed in the world of this individual that I felt true terror with him. I'm a survivor of sexual assault very young, and that was a very terrifying, it was over a period of time, a very terrifying experience of my life. This was similar. Even though there wasn't the physical aspect of assault happening, this was on par to what I experienced. So I got out of it and I thought, what just happened? I have to make sense of this because I don't know what happened. And then I started uncovering and piecing together trauma bonds. I started, Patrick Carnes' work. And then I stumbled into narcissistic abuse. I'd never heard of that. And then when I started to see that, it just all stumbled and started making, all kind of fell into place. It was like puzzle pieces suddenly fit clicking, and then like, oh, that's what I survived.
Yeah, that's amazing. And the book you're talking about, that your book is Love You More: The Harrowing Tales of Lies, Sex Addiction, and Double Cross. And I had
Yes.
the pleasure of reading it. Absolutely loved it. I mean, I couldn't put it down once I started reading it. And I know I personally resonated with a lot of what you shared, having my own personal history with narcissistic abuse. And I was thinking about so many of my other clients and survivors who can relate. So I encourage everybody to go get that book if you're trying to make any sense at all of a toxic relationship that you're in. And like you were just hitting the highlights, there's so many aspects of your story we could dive into. There's coercive control,
Yeah.
there was the spiritual abuse, intimidation, sex addiction,
Yes.
betrayal. I mean, just so many things. And you have all those details in the book. But what I thought I really wanted to hone in on today, because I thought you did this so well, is to highlight the subtleties and the nuances of these relationships. Because not slowing down to see those subtleties is, I think, how we end up in these relationships. We dismiss that gut feeling that says this isn't safe because we just kind of blow right past them. And that's just really what kept standing out to me, is how easy it is to explain away and dismiss, especially early on. And it's a slippery slope. It's not like you go from meeting somebody to your terror, you're fearful of them and you're in terror
Yeah.
of them. It happens over time because the things that they do are big enough to notice, but small enough to dismiss.
Exactly, exactly. And I think the other nuance that I didn't understand is we all have been in those situations where, say, you're with girlfriends, you're young, you're in elementary school, you're walking home beside the road. Maybe kids these days don't ever do that, but my days they did. And somebody slows down and says, "Hey, do you want to ride?" And you get that funny, eerie feeling like, "Oh, this is bad." I mean, maybe even the hair in the back of your arms or your neck
Yeah.
goes up, and you just feel this creepy feeling like there's something wrong. I don't know all of it, but I know it's wrong. You think that's what your gut instinct's going to feel like. No, it does not. It actually doesn't feel that way at all. You don't know that your fight or flight system's been activated. For me, and I'd love to know what it feels like for you, but for me, it feels like I think there's another explanation here, or that doesn't quite sit right, or I don't know if I like this, or it's like a
Yep.
wondering. It's not a creepy bad feeling. It's more of a wondering. And I generally dismiss it by saying, you're being too paranoid, or you're being really hard, or, give the person a break. There's other explanations here. That's what I was not trained to listen to.
Oh, 100%. We think it's going to be the boogeyman. Like
Hmm.
we see the Lifetime movies, or we think, okay, well, if it's a psychopath or a murderer, like I'm going to see that. And I
Right.
think that's part of why survivors get stuck, is because we think that it's an out there thing. It's, well,
Yes.
I would have seen that. Well,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have fallen for that. Well, of course you would have known this, this, and this. But the problem with that is we're putting the pieces together when we already have the pieces. Like you were talking about the puzzle. It's like, yeah, it's easy to see when you look back, but
Yes.
it's seeing it ahead. And the reality is, in order to avoid these relationships, we have to trust our gut without having all those pieces.
Yes, yes, because here's the other really tricky part, and people have asked me, so how do you get around it? You will always see red flags with somebody
Yeah.
because we're human. And no one's perfect. We are all a little glitchy. We have our little idiosyncratic ways of doing things. So how do you know when it's a serious red flag? Because let me back up and give you another really big thing that I don't talk about in the book, but it is true. I have shared this before. My late husband, we were a good marriage. We were in 30 plus years marriage. When I first met him, our dating period was really quiet and exciting and went great. No, he did not love bomb me, but it was sort of this really wonderful building thing. But once we got married, he struck me a few times. So there
Mm.
was a physical abuse in the early part of my marriage with my late husband. We got into therapy right away. I set the limit that this was not going to happen, and I meant it. I did not feel trapped. I felt very capable of leaving. I remember being extremely firm and saying, if you don't go to therapy, I'm out. And we went to therapy and we were in it for a year, and the behavior stopped, and he had this big epiphany, and things was different. That's what normal relationships look like. Now, noticed something bad was happening. And maybe for some of us, it said, well, I've been out at the first moment that ever happened. But I could tell this person was capable of change and reflection, and he cared. He just had never seen another perspective. The problem with predatory people, and that's why I like to call them that, is that they know how to appear that way, and they give the signals that look like that, but it really is, it's all a mirage. It's an illusion that they're feeding us. Whereas real people who are human and sincere, when they get caught and found out, then they make an adjustment in the path.
Yeah. And that's the subtlety, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like having that experience, I think with your first husband, and then the difference of the nuance that I picked up on there was you didn't feel like you were in terror. You didn't feel like you
No.
couldn't leave. In fact, you felt like you could. But that's what changes with predatory people is that you get sucked in before you even realize it. In fact, you think you're making choices
Yes.
with free will, and you're
Yes.
actually making choices from the few options that they've conditioned you to believe that you have.
Yes, you don't realize the room is getting smaller and the walls are shrinking on you. Whereas, like just now, you saying that, you're right. My first dating experience with my late husband, he wasn't manipulative.
Mm.
There wasn't, I mean, there was no game playing. Yeah, did he gaslight me? Well, everybody gaslights each other a little bit, but it wasn't in a form to extract something from me. It was more maybe for him to avoid being accountable in some way. But the second relationship was extraordinarily, I mean, if you read the book Love You More, you know there was a purpose. He was very Machiavellian in a sense. He had an end goal, and he was
Yes.
moving me towards the end goal. And that was, it was interesting. I just got to interview Dr. Daniel Jones, who's an expert on subtypes of dark personalities. And he said, narcissists are going to charm you. Psychopaths are also impulsive, but they'll extract from you. He said, a Machiavellian is going to invade you. And you can hear in my story how I was invaded. That was subtle. He was moving me into a trap, and then he shut it. You could even tell when it got shut. It was on the honeymoon. He shut it, and then it became extraordinarily difficult to hide or get out of, because I didn't realize it, but he was also providing quite a bit of surveillance, and I felt like I was never really didn't really have privacy. He was always monitoring what I was up to. We had 360, so I was voluntarily showing my location. There was ways for him to make sure I wasn't making moves that would have strategically got me out.
Mm. And I actually want to go back. I want to read some of from your book because I think it's just so helpful. So some things like going back to your first date, even as I was reading your book, there were things early on that made you feel uneasy, kind of gave you pause. But again, we always have to remember that it's so easy to tell the story backwards. Hindsight's
Hmm.
2020. So this is your first date. He shared a few things that kind of gave you pause, but don't we all kind of experience that sometimes? So you write that he says, I grew up in an abusive home. I don't like to talk about it, but since you're a psychologist, I figured you'd get it. It's one of the things that attracted me to you. He goes on to talk about being married 4 times and being sexually abused himself. And then I love how you talk about this internal conflict that's going on in your head right then, because we often don't get to see inside survivors, to see inside victims, what is going on. And part of you is like, wow, this is getting really deep really fast. I didn't expect to share traumas on the first date. So that kind of gave you that pause. But then also you're thinking, but I haven't connected with anybody else lately. And I wanted something real. Maybe this is what that feels like. Maybe I should actually appreciate him for just being so open and honest. Maybe he's trusting me. He did just say, like, you're a psychologist, so I thought you would understand, which
Hmm.
that little nuance right there is something. So walk us through some of those early warning signs that told you
Yeah.
something is off here.
There are a lot of them in that date. So let me even move you back even earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So we're on a beach, and we're taking all the beach down. It's a picnic. We're having a picnic on the beach. We don't plan to swim. We plan to have a picnic. So we have all the supplies, coolers and umbrella, blankets, a lot of stuff. More than one person can carry. He insists on carrying it. And then when I attempt to take it, and by the way, I grew up on a farm where everybody shares the load of work. He's actually literally swings his body away from me and then says, even though that's an aggressive act, it looked, it looked like two kids fighting. Like, no, and you swing yourself away. He swings himself away, and I feel that, like, whew, that's intense. He says, it's time for someone to take care of you now. So the two don't match. There's a misalignment
Yeah.
between the behavior and what he just said. I'm feeling that confusion, like what just happened? That looked like two kids squabbling. But he's framing it as care, but it didn't feel like care. We get down there, And then he's also saying, oh, another thing he said on the walk down was he then frames it. He adds what's called, Gavin DeBecker calls typecasting. He adds another statement saying, you don't want to be one of those stubborn women, do you? Who don't accept care.
Oh,
Okay, so
wow.
now there's an edict that's been pushed out that's kind of a directive that says if you don't accept my help in the way that I want it, I'm seeing you as a stubborn person, a stubborn woman. Now, when that happens, our natural unconscious inclination is to work against it. He's just made a statement, a line, a boundary, and we're going to work really hard to be within that confines of a boundary because we don't want to be defined that way. It's when someone uses the B word, it really activates women, and we strive not to be like whatever it is that that person labeled as that B word. He's done that. So I'm now already being set inside of a frame already.
Yeah.
Cooperate, don't be too independent, and he's in charge.
And of course, all of this is subtle. Like
Yes.
it's also not something that's being spoken. So
No.
I always want to highlight like hindsight's 2020. We can look back
Yes.
and go, oh, that's what was happening. But think about how hard this would be. You're a widow, you've tried divorcing, I mean, I'm sorry, tried dating different people, no luck yet. And then you find a guy who, from his profile, looks very nice and very charming, and
Yeah.
you're attracted to him. And then it's just like this little thing. So would you, give up continuing to date him just because of that? Like that's the mindset we're in,
I know. And
from
too
the
many would say,
beginning.
no, cut and run, and you're in error that you didn't cut and run. No, I don't say cut and run. To me, that wasn't enough. Yeah, well, let me, his profile was problematic. If you ever pay attention to Jenny Young's work, Burned Haystack Method, I highly recommend anybody listening who don't, even if you're not single and you're like, why would I like, it's about single. No, no, it's about learning what people are saying, the frame in which they're setting up. Do it anyway. Even if you're not single, join the group. As a woman, it's free. Not, costs you nothing to join that Facebook group. But she talks about critical discourse, context, subcontext, and then the general sort of the zeitgeist of society, the setting that we're all in. And what he did was called, I can't think of the full word, but he did gives directives. And the directives he gives in the profile actually are the indicator that I've met the worst type of profile. I didn't know it
Mm,
because I didn't know that. But he says in his profile, these are my five non-negotiables. I share it in the book. So you
yeah.
you saw that second. And I
Hmm.
thought, well, I don't match any of them, so why not? But what I didn't realize is this is a person who's again already saying, this is the terms by which I will have a relationship. It's the doorway to me. Now, all of us will say, of course, well, I have a doorway. See, here, that's how we dismiss it. Yes, but you don't put it out to the world. You just naturally filter people by your own doorway. Say
Yeah.
for example, one of mine is I don't want to be in a relationship with a man who's using pornography, but I don't go around and putting on my profiles, no porn. I would just
Yeah.
say, I would, hear or tell by the way they interact with me. This is a person who's kind of loose around their sexual involvement, and it's something I'm
Hmm.
just not comfortable with. So I'm not going to engage with them. Another one for me is I don't want cats. I'm highly allergic to cats. It's even hard for me to see a cat on the screen here.
Uh-oh. I've
I'm,
got two,
it's
so
it's okay, but again, I wouldn't say to you, I can't have a relationship with you, Chelsea, because you have a cat. I would just be aware, like, well, I probably won't visit your home, and I'll probably make different changes. You know what I'm saying?
right.
So a person who directs is saying to the world, this is the way that you come by me, and that is a
Mhm.
warning to us that this is somebody who needs to be in control.
And I think that's part of what makes it so challenging is because we mistake confidence or for charisma or charisma for
Yes.
confidence. We see somebody who, oh, well, they know exactly what they want. And they're just like, we have all these great reframes for somebody who's really like you're talking about, setting up the conditions for how to date me, how to be around me, what I expect. But initially, especially if we have our own insecurities, then we can see somebody who's just very seems so sure of themselves, which is really coming from their grandiosity and entitlement.
Yes, it is.
But to
Yes.
see that charisma and charm and go, wow, like I just feel safe around them. I feel taken care
Yes.
of even around them. They're going to do the things that I don't want to do. Like they're just going to kind of lead in the relationship, and I can feel safe back here. But like you're suggesting, that's not a good thing to follow.
No, in fact, I would even change the phrasing to from charisma and confidence to saying confident. We mistaken confidence for competence.
Mm,
It's not competence.
yeah.
Confidence is can be manufactured. It can be based on false information or false beliefs. It could be an identity distortion. it's not, it doesn't really tell you anything except that they feel bold. Okay, so they feel
Mm,
bold, but it doesn't mean they're good at what they're feeling bold around.
mm.
So
I
that's why,
think,
yeah, we
go
get
ahead.
really confused and but we are attracted to it. And I think being aware of that, that our natural psychology likes confidence. We people who are
Yes.
confident make us feel better and we're attracted to it. Here's another thing that I thought was really startling. And this was out of an interview with Danny Sulakowski, and I probably murdered her last name. She looks at evolutionary psychology and particularly around competition for our best advantage so that our lineage doesn't die out. So she's kind of looking at the unconscious drives to humanity. She said she used to look at facial symmetry and facial expressions as well. And she said something fascinating to the ending of the interview. And that is, she said that we can tell we've met a predator. We know the minute we see them, we've actually spotted them. She said, because the way that their face tends to be too symmetrical and the way they convey information is a little off. It's backwards to what normal people do. And there's a lack of depth to them. And there is. If you, even in the, when you read I think about it. I'm a psychologist. I know what deep work looks like. I can even do deep work myself. That if you look at his meeting with me, what he shared, it was shallow, and he didn't go further than 1 millimeter of distance into why he did whatever he did. He married 4 times. He blamed all the exes. And even though his explanation sounded sort of like logical, like a little bit of thought, if you really dissect it, there wasn't any thought. There was no deep, dark night of the soul for him figuring out why he had 4 failed relationships. But here, this is what she said. We picked this all up. I was aware of it. I picked it up. I felt it. This feels shallow. I even say that in the book. This feels shallow. He hasn't done the deeper work here. But she said, but we unconsciously are drawn to want to tuck ourselves in as that person's ally. So that because we recognize they're a wolf and we're hoping they'll won't eat us or at least eat us last.
Wow.
I
That's
know.
powerful.
Isn't that terrifying?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that just reminds me of like the fawn response or
Yes.
even the flop response, which is where you want to make sure that you do not appear as a threat
Yes.
to these predators.
Because you sense they are deeply, deeply terrifying. I mean, he compared himself as a wolf. That was the way he saw himself in the he called women meat, and he was a
Mm,
wolf. Yes. And you could feel yourself wanting, like, if I can tuck myself up next to this person, maybe he'll forget that I'm there.
yep.
And so that's another thing is happening that nobody realizes is that when you get close to somebody like this, you don't because the who's the person who gets killed first in a really bad scenario? The one who makes themselves the biggest target by being the most overt. They usually are the ones done away with first. So you feel that instinctively and you try to like find a way to slink out of there or at least become invisible.
Yeah, and yep, and it's so subtle. And even the things I think that we like predators, narcissists, psychopaths, sociopaths, they do target certain people. Tend to be
Yes.
people who are agreeable, who will go along, who will give second chances, who are so kind-hearted that they just struggle to set boundaries. I mean, and with the proliferation on social media, these self-aware narcissists who will even tell you up front, like, I knew I was lying, or I knew I was covering something up. I knew that if I said this, then you would do this. And so you can even hear that confirmation
Yeah.
from them. And I think we, as more agreeable people, will just positively project onto that other person. We are
Yes.
looking for our traits in them or good traits or to see the good things. Like, I
Yes.
can't tell you how many survivors are like, but I know that there's just a wounded person in there, or I
I know
know
there's
that
good in
there's,
them. That's what they'll say. I know there's good in them.
yes,
Really? How do you
there's
know
good in
that?
them. Like, I just have to love them enough. A
Hmm.
lot of times we're really just trying to save ourselves. Like, we were
Yes.
wounded and
Yeah.
we see that and we want to give them what really we need to be giving ourselves.
Yeah. We underplay, and I cannot stress this enough. I truly believe that on birth, there are different ways in which people see the world. From moment of becoming aware and moving into the world. And then you could say, but why? I know that's where my mind goes, like, what happened? Why would they do that? Why is not
Hmm.
everybody at least from I tend to have a pretty I can be transactional, and if you threaten me, I might even be a little more, careful with how transactional I get. But in general, as long as I'm not feeling threatened, I like to be collaborative with people,
Yeah.
And I would assume I would want the world to be collaborative back with me. But what we don't understand is not everybody has that frame.
Mm-mm.
I'll never forget. I had a conversation with AI. I said there was two types of people in the world, collaborative and competitive. Like, well, yeah, that's two of six. What? There's six? Yeah, there's six, at least six different worldviews. And that started unpacking it for me. I think that's where we get into trouble is we don't understand it. So think of it this way. You become self-aware. You realize the world's dangerous. Maybe you're already not, you're kind of a person with low empathy or not terribly self-reflective. You're excessively aware of how the world references itself around you and your interpretation. It's called mentation. You have a lot of mentation. They've actually showed on imaging scans that narcissists and maybe probably sociopaths as well, that part of the brain that self-references is extremely active. It's more active than it would be in you and I. We don't tend to self-reference that much. They're self-referencing everything. What's it to me? How does it relate for me? What will I get out of it? What might they be doing to me? What's the benefit to me? Complete self-reference. So excessive self-reference, low empathy. So then that means you step on somebody, you're not even aware that you did because you're like, what is it in it for me? You got in
Yeah.
my way. You would, and then you do the part, you give them a little bit of problems with a self-reflection in the sense of learning from insight, like, oh, that didn't turn out the way that I wanted. What might I do different? So you handicap that as well. You have a person born with that in a not a very unsafe environment. You're going to have somebody who's constantly scoping out what's the advantage and learning to read the environment from that standpoint. This is a world, and I'm built to where I see things, and it works that way for me, where it's literally dog eating dog. So I'm going to always look for the advantage, and I assume everything's a manipulation. That's the mindset of a predatory mind. And I think it's there pretty much from birth. And I'm not saying the environment doesn't help shape it, I'm sure, but any environment can shape any worst characteristics. You take a really decent person. I survived a really horrible early environment and I didn't turn out that way. It just sharpened my best qualities. Yeah, it also added to my insecurities, but it didn't turn me into a predator. Why?
Right.
Because I didn't have those deficits to begin with. So they've spent their entire year thinking, what is the angle? How are you out to get me? How can I best get something from you that you don't want to give me? And you do that enough and you become extremely good at reading people and understanding the advantages whenever you walk into the room.
Which is a really great insight and why conversations go nowhere. And there's
Yes.
no amount of insight that's going to get them to change because it's A, that part of their brain is kind of like not
Yeah, it's not
working.
engaged that way. And
Yeah.
they see this as manipulation.
Yeah.
And the
Say more
more,
about that.
yeah, because the more, so again, think of this mindset. The world has always been, another way I liken it's like if you ever watch the Korean um, red light, green light, I think that's the Korean TV series where people go in and try to not to die. Every game is an end to the death. One of them is this tug of war, which is over top of this glass platform. And if you lose, you fall to your death. You fall to your death. To them, that's what every interaction is like. It's to the death of self, death of what they want, death of being called out. I mean, all of these types of things. They don't want that to happen. So vulnerability equals being seen. Being seen means loss of advantage and being vulnerable to that person's exploitation. They see you
Mm.
as another predator. You're not a collaborative person. You're the enemy, always the enemy. You're either an asset to be acquired, or in a minute they've acquired you, you immediately move to the enemy. So they
Mm.
never can let you in on anything because the minute you do, they believe you will take advantage of them in the same way they're taking advantage of you.
Yes.
And
And
that's
I
the
think
part we don't get.
no, we don't get that. But
Yeah.
I think under the surface we sense that they think I'm always out to get them. Like, so I can just hear people's heads, their thoughts.
Like, and
Like,
me. Yeah, I
yeah,
spent the whole book trying to heal them.
yeah,
We were in
exactly. So
therapy the entire time of the book.
yes, and my relationship, same, like 90% of the relationship, we're in therapy. So that's the thing we get caught in is, well, I just need to let them know that I'm for them. I'm not against them. I'm not a predator. I'm not going to manipulate them.
Yes.
And then they're going to let their guard down and we're going to be able to come close. But
But here's the thing. I think this is my guess. I don't know. I haven't read somebody who's people like this don't let people get close. So we have to
Mhm.
speculate. Even Ted Bundy played games. He would sometimes reveal real things, and then other times he would obfuscate. He didn't want you to really know because nobody they don't want to be known. Being known is dangerous. And here's a way I could see it happening. My ex would lie about everything to anybody, about anything, and things that truly mattered to no one. It
Yeah.
was no risk.
So it makes it pathological. Like they
Exactly. It
just
was
do that
very
all the time.
pathological. So we'd be traveling, going somewhere. We'd get a call, and his friend would say, "Hey, where are you? What are you up to?" Oh, and he'd lie. Like his friend doesn't care. They're never going to check up on it. There's no investment to this. Why? Well, this is what I realized because I'm always about making patterns make meaning, make sense
Hmm.
to me. He felt like the truth was optional because he didn't have a right to know him. No one had earned the right to know him. He's never going to let you know him. Why? Because being known is equal to him annihilation. Because then it would be giving you the keys to himself, and then you could take advantage of him because he lives in a world that everybody is extracting something from somebody. He's never going to have that happen. So that's why treatment fails with these individuals. They don't get to the place of saying, wow, being known may actually make me feel like there's belonging and there's someone who's really truly safe. And I know the temptation is, and this is where our arrogance is, because part of the healing is we have to admit our own superior, just delusions of superiority is, well, I will be the one that fixes them. I certainly had lots of that in that book. No, you will not be the one who fixes them. If they cannot fix themselves, they will not be fixed. And if they can't see that there's something missing and lost in their life, and yeah, are they miserable people? Absolutely. They're constantly bored. They're constantly restless. They never really fully achieve anything that means anything to them. That's why they're always going for more. I mean, this person was pursuing one sexual experience after another, never met his needs ever. It was insatiable. That's a very miserable experience to have. But they don't see that the answer is to be vulnerable and to be known, and that's where you're going to have it. To them is no, that's the riskiest, and I would never do that.
Yeah, that is true. We have to sit with that we can't rescue and we can't save. And I think that's the opportunity for us to do our work is
Yes.
why is that so, why are we so passionate about that? Like, why do we have such a deep yearning to save someone? I
Yes.
know I can't speak for everybody's story, but a lot of times that comes from we really wish somebody would have saved us.
Yes, and for me, and this was the other thing, and I've really very rarely met it, and I don't know what it was. It was something I- I'm 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 not fully asexual in the sense that I just not interested. I am very interested in sexual intimacy, but I have to be connected to a person.
Hmm.
I do not find beautiful, attractive bodies sexual. I just don't.
Hmm.
I just admire them from the distance. There was something about him, and it wasn't necessarily even sexual energy. People reading it, and I think even he thinks this. I think he's commented at least once on one of my posts and he's framed it this way. So I think he thinks I think this way. He's missed the boat if he does. Is that there was something about him I found lovely, like in a way that was almost painfully beautiful. And I don't know what that was about. And I very rarely experienced that with there's a few people that I can see in life that I could think that where I would hurt from the pain of what I perceived to be as his beauty. And it wasn't just more that he was physically attractive. Yeah, I mean, he was a man. I mean, he's a flawed, but yeah, he was good looking. But there was something about him as a person, unique person, that I just was really moved by. That I don't understand. And I don't think it's because he was a sociopath or a psychopath. I think there's just some connection that I had that was really rare and different. But that I wanted to save that. When you find that, who doesn't want to hold, it's sort of the siren. Who would not want to like cling to the siren if you found it?
Yeah, that's interesting. More in-depth work for us to do and
Yeah, for
reflect on.
sure. For sure.
If you could go back, what would you tell yourself on that first date to pay attention to and to trust that you initially dismissed?
Um, he was and this is just a mismatch for me. I'm extremely, maybe I don't come across that way in public, but I'm a very quiet person and I have enormous amount of solitude in my life. Very low stimulating environment that probably for most people would drive them bored, silly.
Sounds great to me. I'm
I
a
know,
high
I know.
introvert, so
Yeah, I'm autistic and an introvert a strong introvert on top. He's
yeah.
the opposite. He was so dynamic and loud that his voice would almost, it would give me a headache, it would hurt. It
Mm.
would, physically hurt the sound of his voice. I should have paid more attention to those things, the things that were, now that's just practical things. It's not him as a bad person. It's just
Yeah.
things I need to respect about me. But I think I should have felt how edgy he made me. The fact that I was
Mm.
already like, okay, I can't step up and help out with the carrying the stuff down to the beach. That's already a no. He made me uncomfortable. He labeled me, and that didn't feel really good, and I don't like that. Ooh, he shared more information than I was really comfortable in sharing. You know what? There's sort of a shallowness to what he's saying that doesn't really resonate as somebody who's done any work, real work. Um, yeah, I should have paid attention. And then even I know I shared some of the ways in which those dates felt romantic, and they were kind of romantic dates. But there was also kind of this undercurrent. Like one of them that I was after we had an intimate experience, I wanted to go and use the restroom, and he said, "No, don't go." And I needed to use the restroom. And he's like, "No, I'm not ready." And he kind of whined about it. And I should have seen that as, that's not really respectful. So I didn't pay attention to the disrespect that was occurring to me. Of course, that whole date, if anybody, when I was writing that and I had a writings group read that, like, and I called, yeah, we made love. I'm like, no, Carrie, that wasn't love. There was nothing loving about that interexchange that just happened there. In fact,
Mm.
people have wanted to know. I got some criticism for why I was so explicit in the front end of the book because the rest of the book is not. But if you get through the front part, it's very explicit. The reason is because these relationships pervert everything. They
Yeah.
move way too fast. The sex is wrong. There's signs of things going wrong in the sex if you pay attention to it,
Yep.
how you feel. And I know how I felt. It was jarring. I couldn't relax. I was embarrassed. I couldn't talk about it to my girlfriends. There's a big tip off. You can't go back and, oh, it was best start. No, I'm ashamed. Why am I feeling so
Mm.
ashamed? I'm asked to be accommodating in a way that felt to me like being stripped naked in a very
Mhm.
uncomfortable way. I wear wigs. I talk about how he's required me not to wear a wig and with a stranger that I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
those are the things we need. So if somebody's making you feel really off balance and out of your skin, and you find yourself can't even go back to kind of talk to anybody in fun about it and just about it, there's something happening that's disturbing. You're being disturbed. You're just not recognizing it.
All of those tips are so helpful. And that's something that stood out to me is just how early on boundaries are being crossed. And again,
Yeah.
subtle. I just want to highlight that. Like I think, you had suggested waiting for him downstairs when he
Yes.
was getting ready to leave after the hotel. But he's like,
I
no, come
really didn't want to go
upstairs.
upstairs. I really did not,
Yeah.
That was a
Right.
moment where I was like, but I'm gonna see, here's the where you get that back to that. There wasn't like, okay, I just felt edgy. It's how it felt. I felt edgy, and I kept thinking, but he's a good guy and he's very respectful, and he even pecked my cheek the night before. There was all signals of I'm not gonna cross your boundaries.
Yeah.
None of them at all. But I just kept thinking, I don't want to be in a room alone with them. I just don't. And then I'm thinking, but I don't really want to be, I don't want to make myself look difficult and look like I don't know, a prude or something. So, and I get into the room, and I put myself across from them. It's like diagonal. I don't go just across. I'm diagonal from him as far as away as he's moving around dressing and getting ready to leave. And yet he engages with me in a way. And then he says the weirdest things that I never pick up on. That's really, really weird. Like he says, "I didn't know I'd want you this much." Well, that doesn't, what woman ever wants to hear that I didn't know I'd want you this much, or I didn't know I'd find you? I mean, I don't remember exactly how I phrased it, but it was insulting.
Mm-hmm.
It was, if
Yeah.
you, again, I think people pull their sentences out of what they say, put it on a piece of paper and ask yourself, who says this? And what are they saying it about when they say something like this? Who says this is like, "No, I didn't like you. I didn't find you attractive. I'm shocked I feel any attraction for you." That's who says that, not
Mm.
somebody who wants a relationship with you.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
A person who wants a relationship would say, "You are so beautiful. I've really completely mesmerized. They wouldn't say that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that kind of stuff. And then the ending, we end up engaged in a form of sexual experience. I'm very awkward. It's not reciprocal. And then he abruptly shifts and says, almost like, "Well, look forward to seeing you next time." Excuse me?
There's the
What?
mismatch, like you're saying.
Yeah.
Like they like talk about, his previous marriages and abuse, but then doesn't follow it up with an explanation of how or why that happened. Like the
Yeah.
depth, it's like pushing you too far, pushing your sexual boundaries, but then being like, all right, we'll see ya, just like he
Yes.
was talking to one of the guys. Like
Yes.
those nuances and mismatch.
Yeah,
are
but
some,
I want to say something because we did talk
yeah.
about the fact that how intimacy occurred really fast and way too, way up front. I have had people, especially in religious circles, say to me, well, if you had stopped that and didn't do that, then none of this would have happened. And I want to clearly say to people, if you meet the right kind of predator who has an end goal, this is playing chess, and they will play the match out. And even if you withhold key pieces that you think they're invested in, yeah, they're invested in those pieces, but the end goal is their objective. They will still follow it out. I truly am convinced if I held out and wasn't sexually involved with this guy before we got married, he would have still married me.
Hmm.
Why? Because I was worth a lot of money and he wanted the access to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for
So,
clarifying that.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I get people say, well, don't kiss for the first 3 months. I'm not saying don't do that. I have no problem with somebody doing it. But if you meet the wrong person, that isn't going to stop the abuse.
That's right. And this is the whole problem with this whole conversation is that we put way too much responsibility on the victim and survivor.
Exactly.
Are
Exactly.
are there things that we can do to listen to our gut and set boundaries and stay firm with that? Sure. That's not going to stop them from trying. That's not going to stop them from gaslighting you. That's in fact, they sometimes will see that as a challenge. I know
Yes,
my
yes. In fact,
first
he
ex
did. He saw
absolutely
as a
was.
psychologist, and that was part of what made him target me. I was a psychologist. He knew from the beginning I was a widow. He suspected I came into life insurance, and I don't tell you because I repressed it even while writing the book. I didn't remember till I was near the end of the book. I actually told him my net worth right
Mhm.
shortly after the first date. I was so upset that I did that, and I knew I had ruined any possibility of ever thinking this person would have reasonable reasons for wanting to be in a relationship with me. I even thought, you need to quit it now. You've destroyed this relationship. You will
Mm.
never be able to understand this person's motives. So get out. And I didn't. And I literally, not only did I not, I literally put it so far away that I didn't remember I ever even said that until after the whole story was over. But it ended up that likely that was his entire end game. Entire end game was to be able to capitalize on. And he gave me clues about it. I didn't talk about it a whole lot in the book because I've had a chance to do a lot more thinking. But this person, intended to hopefully destroy me so that he could come into the money because he would have been my heir. So
Yeah. And still, that's on him.
yeah, exactly. And I think the other point that you're making is that we are helping people become better, sort of resistant to predators, but we're not taking care of the predator problem. If roughly 10% of the world is a predator, what are
Yeah.
we going to do with that 10%? The fact that they're moved from victim, because if you are good enough that they move off of you and leave you alone, they'll just find another person to victimize. He's victimized many other women after me. That's the terrible part of this whole story is he's walked free. He stole a lot of money from me. He's definitely betrayed me, left me harmed other women like me, and he's still harming women now and other people. And what are we going to do about this bigger problem? And I don't have a solution, but we're not trying to even find a solution. Instead we tell victims, "Oh, you just missed the red flags," or "Oh, you're too easy even a target." Or whatever thing, and I get so angry, sorry, and you can tell I get so angry about that
Yeah.
because it completely misses the point. Should we lock them all up? I don't know. I mean, should we put them on an island like we did with Australia? I don't know, but I do know that I wish they weren't walking freely. I wish we could spot them. I play a game. I'm very big into video games. There's a wonderful game that I love. I've put a lot of hours into it called Arc Raiders. It's You go into this world, which is built beautifully, so it's really fun to be in this world. You play with other players, but you're also playing against the environment. It's a dangerous environment. The players are real people. They could be good people or they can play nasty. You don't know when you meet a person whether or not they're going to betray you or help you. The game is becoming affected by the fact that it's called PvPvE, meaning player versus an environment, because every person has to make a choice if you're a good person, an ally, or you're going to be a betrayer. The game is now in a crisis, and they're thinking about, and they're running a simulation right now in China where they're now saying that if person becomes a betrayer on the map, they label them as hostile. And then the whole map gets to know there's a hostile person and you can treat them accordingly, whatever way that map decides to. You can gang up on them, you can avoid them, you can get off the map, but you now know somebody is on that map who's dangerous, who's going to, if they meet you, kill you and take your stuff. I wish we could do that in real life. Why can't we
Yeah.
just label them as hostile? you know?
So many people have said, we need pages where like we can highlight this
I
person,
know.
is a predator. But then of course predators would find their way on that page and upend the
Oh
whole
yeah, and
thing.
then they'll destroy it in some way. And in fact, somebody tried to do that, and people started listing thousands of names, started going up on this list, and it got taken down in hours. Yeah,
Wow.
literally destroyed in hours.
Well, that's the problem is culturally, systemically, predators are going to do what they're going to do. But I've always said they can't hold as much power if we don't let them, but it has to be a collective. Like
Yes.
if it can't be one person, but if collectively in workplaces, in society, if we did not allow or tolerate or, support gaslighting, abusive behavior, if we didn't get, sucked into charm and charisma being like the way that we make decisions about all kinds of things, leaders, whoever, then we wouldn't have this problem, or they wouldn't have, so much power.
But here's the other problem is they assume here, and I heard this and I agree. I think this is absolutely what happens. Any great movement then becomes infiltrative. And then soon those people hold incredible positions of power within them. And then once that happens, they then corrupt the movement or distort the purpose of the movement into the benefit of themselves. We see that time and time again. I think one of the disturbing ones for me, and again, as this is more from a spiritual angle, was Ravi Zachariah, who had this incredible ministry, impacted thousands, if not millions of people's lives, definitely impacted mine, to find out that it was hiding this incredible, terrible secret life of his, that he was actually one of the worst wolves among sheep. The challenge becomes how to begin to recognize that. I think there's some things that we can, maybe this is a great place to sort of segment into that. And notice the misalignments. Start to know the difference between just trust, unearned trust, earned trust versus paranoia. When you're used to just giving trust, you think that making people earn trust feels like paranoia. No, it's not. Get to know what the differences are between those three places. Paranoia starts from the position that nobody can be trusted and everybody has an angle. Victims never move there. If you've been victimized, you're not going to become paranoid. I'm sorry. You can get cynical, maybe even skeptical, but you're not going to be paranoid from the position of everybody's bad. But you can learn, like, if I could go back and rerun that date, first of all, I probably would never have even matched, honestly. I would have looked at the profile. Nah, anybody tells me what I'm not allowed to be, I'm not interested in having in my life. But let's pretend I got past the bad profile and met him. What I would say is this is information. It's just a lot of information. I'm going to see where this information takes me. What I think a lot of us do, I know I do, I tend to come to a conclusion about the relationship too fast, and I make it so I get all in. For me, what I discovered after the marriage, and I knew he knew my religious convictions, and that to me, marriage was forever. I found out I didn't know him at all. I had completely married a stranger. That should be a really good reason that we give people an out. Yes, you can leave a relationship when they basically have lied to you about who they are. Get
Mm.
out. Even if they've not, betrayed you yet. To me, that's such a significant betrayal. Get out. But I now, whenever I get to know somebody, I always preface it is I'm in as much as I know. And as I go, I learn more. I allow myself new options to reassess whether or not I'm in or out. Whereas I
That's
never would
great.
have done that before.
Yeah, even giving yourself that option and knowing that whether
Yeah.
you tell that person, upfront or not, but just knowing I'm going into this giving myself an out. Like if I don't feel it, I don't owe them an explanation. I don't have to over explain. Like
Yes.
I just have a basic human right of agency and autonomy to leave
Yes.
this relationship. And something else that, about his profile was he was straight up lying. Like he had said he was divorced and he was still married. Like we found out later in the
Yeah,
book.
no, I know. And in fact, he like missed that detail that he was still married, and yet I sensed it a few months into it that there's something wrong. And
Yeah.
it's not that he had it wasn't like he was still, was he in communication with her? Yeah. And if I looked at the communication, yes, it indicated they're calling each other husband and wife, but he had called names of everybody. So I didn't even know if that was real. And besides, I'd have to crack his phone to see that. I'm seeing this after the fact, after I
Right.
mean, in the moment, did I know? No, I had no clue. For again, people don't know, as I found out within days of being married, if we're about ready to be, it was about ready to be an unlawful marriage. We were about ready to get married while he's already married.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
polygamous. That was
And
the
that
word I was trying to
reminds
look for. Yeah,
Yeah, and
exactly.
that reminds me of this concept of betrayal violence, how your
Mm,
consent, your ability to consent is stolen from you. When somebody is lying to you and they're betraying you up front, you are making decisions based on false information.
yes.
So you're
Yes.
not really
No,
consenting.
I never consent. If I knew, if I counted, he had upward to 7 other women he was actively texting and having relationships with while our engagement. I would, if I had ever known, I would absolutely, no way, would never, I wouldn't even have made the second date because that's not under which I wanted a relationship. I think
Yes.
there was another point that I wanted to circle back to, besides making people earn trust and always leaving yourself an out. I don't know if I can remember it off, but there's something else that I think that's really helpful. If I think of it, I'll come back to it. But I think we do have more agency that we can than we can have. And I wish people felt sort of a confidence in themselves. Oh, I know what it was. Okay, I got it. I wish we more purposefully practice healthy relationships. Now,
Mm,
people are going to like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Are we
yeah.
all? No. A lot of us are tolerating a lot of unhealthy behavior between friends, between family, between partners, or between us and the kids, between letting our kids do it. We don't really practice a lot of healthy behavior practices. Because in fact, one of the discussions I had with Dr. Jones is I said, yeah, in my family, and I even framed it because we're autistic, the whole group of us, we allow each other a lot of respect for our sensitivities. So if you don't want us to stop a show and watch another show while we're watching a series of shows because it disrupts you too much and it's too uncomfortable, we don't do it as a family. We will uphold that rule, even though the rest of us doesn't feel a need for it. We will not make fun of it. We will support it. Now, I didn't get into that much detail with him, and he stopped me. He goes, Kerry, that's not because you're autistic, it's because you're safe.
Mm,
I'm like, oh, that's what should be happening everywhere all the
mm,
time. And I'm even in my mind saying, no, there's a reason why we're doing it was because we're like supporting each other's disabilities. No, that's called safety.
yeah.
Are we promoting safety in the relationship? Are you guys making fun of anybody or doing like sarcastic jokes or making somebody the butt of the joke? When somebody comes home with a bad day, are you being careful not to minimize it or invalidate it or compete with it? Are you
Yeah.
really, when somebody does something that you don't like under the timing that you don't like it, are you making sure you're not making them feel guilty or bad about that? Are you behaving in a way that's safe? And if we can get used to that and know what safety looks like, then when we meet unhealthiness, we're going to be able to recognize it a whole lot faster.
That's huge because I know for me and most of the survivors that I work with, we don't know what healthy looks like. That's part of the problem. We go
Yes,
into narcissistic relationships and we're like, well, this is kind of what I grew up with, or I'm used to setting my needs aside or having to figure out what they want, walking on eggshells, being hypervigilant, being a little bit anxious, not being able to talk about certain things, having to watch their mood. I'm kind of used to those
exactly.
things.
I know, or even have a list of what's allowed to talk about, what's not allowed to talk about in your daily life. Yeah, in fact, I think everybody should buy Lindsay Gibson's book, the second book in the series. It's called, I think, Recovery for Adult Children of Emotionally
Mm,
Immature Parents, because in the
yeah.
back she has an appendix to me that's worth the whole book, and that's her 10 emotional bill of rights. You should have them up on the house, and it should be on your magnet on the refrigerator, and everybody should be abiding by that. You don't have to listen to what you don't want to listen to. You don't have to go to something that just because somebody else wants you to go to it. You
Hmm.
should be able to tell your story and have this. I mean, we should all be living by that. If we don't, then when we meet somebody who's the sort of the extreme, the outlier on this, we don't recognize it because we've already normalized so much unhealthy behaviors.
And healthy people, at least I'll speak for me, I felt uncomfortable around healthy people for a while. Like, I don't belong here, almost like I don't have the
Mm,
language for this. I don't know. You mean you can just talk about your feelings? You mean I don't have to think of all the reasons and like preface everything before I say it? I can just have an opinion. Like, there's so many rules now being in a healthy marriage that I did not realize this is how healthy relationships operate. Like you can
oh, I
just be
know.
yourself, you can just have a bad day, you can apologize and you can move on from it. Things aren't going to be held over against you. Like I still ask my husband, "Are you mad at me? Like did I do too much? Did I say too much? Are you upset with me?" And he's always like, "No, you just made a
Yeah,
wrong turn," or
yeah,
like literally down to, "I'm sorry, I have to pee. We're on this really long road trip. And he's like, yeah, me too. Well, my first husband would have berated me for having to
yes.
like stop on a road trip to go to the bathroom. So it's these simple things that you take for granted. If you always had healthy relationships, you're like, of course you can go to the bathroom or say what you think or have an opinion. That's not a given in a toxic relationship.
Yeah, no. And we don't know that. And because of that, then we don't realize that we're stepping into a room that's shrinking. when you're already used to. So this is another thing that I would do with clients back in the day, and I didn't really understand why I knew why I would have them do it at the moment, and it had a purpose, but I wasn't realizing what I was tapping into that really had to do with healthiness and being present in the room. It's in the emotional room. So I'd have people like imagine an imaginary mental space. And in this mental space, this room, populate it with all the people who are most important to you. Start to imagine them in the room. And then I'd say, okay, just notice who's where and what are they doing and what do they look like. And then I'll say, okay, so who's the loudest, the brightest person in the room? Who's standing in the center of the room? Who's standing to the edges of the room? Who did you notice that you can't really find very well? And then where are you standing in the room? And for a lot of us, we're usually in the back corner or blending into the wallpaper. We're usually almost so nondescript or ghost-like. And meanwhile, the people who are very intense, doing that we have to do a lot of management around, tend to be the biggest, brightest, loudest people in that room. Then the challenge becomes, okay, so how do you then move closer to the center and have people become more equally present to each other so that their brightness is just as bright as yours? How can you start to shift those dynamics to where you take one step closer to sharing greater power and equity between all of you?
Mm.
Unhealthy people will not like that and they will push against it hard. But that tells you something. That tells you, I know for me, when I got out of that relationship, I had to basically strip my whole social support system and went right down to bare none and start back over because because of my personality, I was always in the corner of the room with everybody.
Yeah, I
So
love
it's
that.
scary becoming into the room. It's really hard. So you're right. It's not just not inviting the right people. Here's the other thing. So, and I haven't read the book. I can't wait. But, Dr. Mitchell's proposing, Karen Mitchell's proposing, not everybody gets targeted. Okay. So I did, you did. What will make us less targetable?
Yeah.
I think becoming more present in the room. If you're requiring more, expecting more, you're knowing what self-respect is, you push yourself forward, you're more likely to be disinteresting to less interesting to this person.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love that. First of all, I love that exercise of just because most people to bring to mind, yeah, where am I in that room? Because I'm imagining as you're even thinking, or I'm imagining as you're describing it, I saw myself kind of to the corner, like
Yeah.
observing everybody else. And
Yes.
it becomes so ingrained in part of who we are. We don't even realize we are taking that backseat to
Yes.
our life.
Yes. Exactly.
So we absolutely taking up space. I talk about boundaries in a different way than most people. I don't talk about them as something that you set or do. It's a way that you live and move and exist in the world, and you exist as if you matter too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's to what you're saying is so huge and can make you disinteresting to narcissists and to toxic people is because if you exist as if you matter too, that's always going to be a rough edge to them. Like, they
Yes.
to us are like that
Yes.
kind of, it's, like you said, like there's that edge. Well, if you exist as if you matter, you're an edge to them. So they don't really like you.
Yeah. Yeah. Because their excessive mentation, your disruption to that excessive mentation.
And their belief that they should
Yes.
be taking up the most
Yes.
space in the room.
Yes. And the other reason why I think that it works really well is we can give people practical steps and tools, but you have to change the core of your essence.
Yeah.
It isn't just enough to do, you have to become. So how do you become? Well, the hard part is integrating that in so that it's naturally part of you. So I think that mental exercise is a really great test. You can keep asking yourself that because it's really easy to imagine. It kind of requires a sort of a nice degree of honesty that you can see, am I in the room? Am I really interacting in the room? What's my fear? Who's the bigger players here? It's a really great way for you to sort of mentally challenge and move things around in a way that can help you begin to embody it. That's the hard part. You can practice really great boundaries, but you may not be embodying them. So I come back to this is another thing. Sandra Brown said this in an interview is that she used to sit with psychopaths, both male and female psychopaths. She was working in the prison systems. She did it for a long period of time. And I think at one point she asked them, so how did you target? Why did you pick who you picked? Now you'll hear people like Don Hennessy say, well, it's your kindness. Also, Sandra Brown's work says it's agreeableness and conscientiousness. But they said, you have a light. You're light. And
Wow.
we're attracted to the light. You're never going to dim this light. That's the reality. You're never, as a person, going to dim this light. Now, I have now since heard on social media that other people have chimed in and said, yes, my partner said that. I didn't know what they meant. They said I had a light. And I think that's really fascinating that there's something about victims that we stand out to those that are not victims. But how to shift? So, how do you embody that? How do you continue to be a light, but embody also strength and difficulty, like you said, edge
Yeah.
to that light? And I think it is learning how to occupy space. And here's another big for me was a revolutionary idea. It's okay if people get angry with you. You may lose the relationship, you may not lose the relationship, but becoming conflictual does not make you a bad person.
I love that. Like, we just need to pause on that. Becoming conflictual does not make you a bad person.
Yes, but we've learned don't be negative. Don't be a burr under the saddle of somebody. Don't be conflictual because then you're going to be rejected and you're a bad. No, what a person does to you being conflictual is an expression of them. It has nothing to do with you.
And it's
Really, it doesn't.
information.
It's
It's
just more
information.
information. They
Yeah.
don't like it. They don't want it. It challenges them in a way that's uncomfortable. Maybe it bruises their ego, but that's all about their issues, not your issues. Your job is just to be in charge of you. And it means even at times being conflictual. I don't like doing it. I have a hard time. I am a conflict avoidant kind of person. But I find that if I don't practice it, I will become, even by nice people, harmed.
Yeah, that's something that I've thought about before is we teach people what to expect from us. I don't
Yes.
think you teach people how to treat you. I think people treat you how they want to treat you. Like, we can't stop predatory behavior, but you teach people what to expect, whether it's predators or even other kind
Yes.
people. Like, if you're just a person who somebody can always call at midnight and you're going to be there, like, even if it's not an emergency, even if it's just because, or you're the person who just always says yes and always has time, you're just teaching the people around you that you're always going to move your own boundaries. You're always going to jump when they say so, even if they're not intending to take advantage of you.
Yeah. And what you're inadvertently saying without even meaning to is, I am not human and I'm not
Mm.
deserving
And
of
you don't have to
human.
treat me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
human rights and respect. So you don't need to treat me that way. It's okay to be human. It's okay to say, it's really late. I'm tired. I will get back to you on this tomorrow.
And healthy people will not push back on that.
And if they're healthy, they'll say, sure, no problem. If they're
Right.
not healthy, now you know that they're not healthy because they're like, really? Well, I need you. Why not? I mean, yeah. Or I see how it is. Okay, never speak to me again. I mean, you get any of that kind of stuff, that tells you a whole lot about this person.
It definitely does. Well, this conversation has been incredible. I think we could talk for hours and
Oh,
hours.
I know you could. Yeah.
Um, but for anybody who's hearing this and resonating, I always just end with this question of, if there was one thing that you could tell survivors to do to start restoring their resilience, what would that be?
Really get to know who you are and become your own friend.
Mm,
That was my way out. I got to meet myself and made friendship with myself. No one can take that away from me. No one. If I end up alone on an island, God forbid, I'm still okay because I have me.
that's huge. I love that. All right.
Yeah.
Carrie, thank you so much. Where can people find you, connect with you, your work?
The best way to find me is on my website, kerrymcavoyphd.com. Everything is there, the podcast, the books, my membership, the app. So if you really want to know what I'm up to and what's happening, that's the place to go to, kerrymcavoyphd.com.
Great. We will link all that in the show notes.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Carrie for joining me and providing so much insight about how predators think, how we can protect ourselves, and protect the light that is inside of us. It would mean so much to me if you like and subscribe to help the show grow and reach more survivors. And as always, I want to remind you that no matter where you are on your healing journey, resilience can be restored, and we're going to keep building it together. So I'll see you in the next episode.